Chad last visited us in 2019 when his cookbook first came out, and then he agreed to help us put on a Zoom mushroom festival in 2020 during COVID. So he was one of the participants that zoomed in from California. Chad has revised the Mushroom Hunters Cookbook to edition 2. Like I said, we were fortunate to have Chad come with us, visit us in 2019, and he stayed with us, so we got to taste some of his food that he prepared at our house, and then subsequently, like he's doing tonight, served to the audience. We were thoroughly amazed. We've been mushrooming for some 25 or years, and we're still blown away by Chef Hyatt's recipes and his take on the individual mushroom flavors and how to bring out their qualities. So Chad Hyatt, Chef Chad Hyatt from California. Where are you at in California?
San Jose, so Bay Area.
From the Bay Area, is here tonight as our invited speaker. Please give him a nice round of applause.
I think my voice is funny well. This mic is really just a decoy. So again, thanks for having me back. I've been in Eugene. It's fun to be back. I'm sorry I'm here so quickly in and out, but like Chris was saying, I'm a chef. Okay. I have hundreds of cookbooks, but when I went digging through all my books, I find that so much of it is kind of what I describe as kind of Betty Crocker, like the kind of things that my grandmother would have been cooking for my mom when she was a little girl in the 1950s. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's a place for that kind of food, but I wanted recipes that were more like the kind of food I was cooking at home and at work every day. So a little more modern, not always so heavy. And so that was a big part of writing this book. And I'm going to talk about the book, but it's not meant as a sales pitch. I'm not a salesman, I'm a chef. But telling you about the book tells you what I'm about and what I want to show you. So that was the first thing, is just coming up with new ideas on how to use mushrooms to kind of modernize the way I was using them a little. The second big motivation was that just like the recipes were all old-fashioned, it seems like so much of what we're taught about how to handle mushrooms, how to work with mushrooms, is based more on mythology and kind of lore than it is on the actual chemistry and biology of the mushrooms. And so I have a science background, and that always drove me crazy. So I really wanted to dive into that a little bit. Just things like getting mushrooms wet. They're wet beings that are full of water. It's silly to worry about getting them wet. Um, I can go on a diatribe. I like to blame the French for that, but I don't know any French people here today, so it's less fun. Because really every culture I know of that is into mushrooms, except for the French, soak their mushrooms in water, wash their mushrooms in water, cook their mushrooms in water. But for some reason, some French, and the French are very good cooks, don't get me wrong, but they're not the be all end all about mushroom knowledge. So anyway, don't get me, if you haven't figured out, I can go on these tangents, so you might have to bring me back in every once in a while. So the third thing that I really motivated me a lot with the book was that there's so many mushrooms in the woods, and most of us get focused on, a few that we know, like chanterelles and porcini, morels, lobsters, whatever it is for you. But there's so many things that often carpet the wood, like russula and lactarius and swillus, that in other cultures are really highly prized mushrooms. And we're taught here not to waste our time on them. And so I really wanted to dig into that a little bit and kind of come up with ideas on how to use these different mushrooms and learn what other cultures were doing with them. So those three things. Normally, when I come do these talks, if I have time to go hunting, I like to go pick one of the so-called weird mushrooms and feed it to you guys. But I on the move too much, and I haven't had time to do that, so you guys are off the hook on this week. But so those three things were what really motivated the book. So originally, this book came out in 2018. As Chris said, this is a new revised edition now.
Um, I should mention briefly that it is very heavily revised. When the publisher wanted to do this, my thing was, if I'm going to do this, it's going to be a new enough book that I'm not going to feel bad if people buy it for the second time. But so I swapped out about 25 recipes. A lot of the stuff that stayed in it changed, was revised. I've learned a hell of a lot in the 7 years between those two publications. So there's a lot of things that I just wanted to change. It was a chance for me to fix things that I wasn't happy with anymore. There's a lot of new writing and a lot of revision, reorganizing, and a lot of new photography. And I think it's a much prettier book this time around, I think. So anyway, that's as much as I want to talk about the book. Uh, so before I jump into actually doing food here, I always like to say that I don't think it's very exciting for you guys or for me if I stand here and cook one thing for an hour. I can show you that I know how to cook really complicated things, but I want to give you things that are useful to you and that you can use at home. It's more interesting, I think, for everybody if I give you a bunch of ideas that you can play with at home more than me showing you that I know how to cook something fancy. So, having said that, I'm going to give you 5 different things to taste. A few of them I'm going to prepare up here. A few of them are already prepared. And the stuff that's already prepared, we'll talk about in detail. It's all very simple stuff. It just doesn't make the most exciting thing to watch me cook. Um, so you'll have lots of things to taste. Because I'm going to talk so much about these things, I'm going to jump around a lot. So please, please, please interrupt me, ask questions. I think you guys have already seen I'm quite capable going off on random tangents. Feel free to reel me back in. Uh, but yeah, seriously, ask questions as they come up. If you have a question, don't be shy. Please pipe up, raise your hand, or shout it out. If all else fails, throw something at me, preferably not a chair. Um, but yeah, so having said that, I guess I'm jumping in. I always do this kind of by the seat of my pants. You have a question already? Oh, yeah, so the shirt, so my wife is from Catalonia, the northeastern part of Spain. So this shirt is Catalan actually. Catalonia is obsessive, crazy about mushrooms. I tell people I think more than anywhere else in Western Europe. Nobody's going to compete with the Eastern Europeans. But so they have a bunch of sayings and things like that that are about mushrooms. And this is Catalan. It's not Spanish. It says "cat del bolet." Bolet is the word for mushroom. It doesn't mean bolete, it means mushroom. Uh, and it basically means like touched in the mushroom, touched in the head. It's a little like you're a little bit not right, kind of. And my niece and nephew got me this shirt for Christmas one year, and I wore it around my wife's aunt, and she was like, "Do you know what that means? I don't think that's very nice." And so, what's that? Yeah, exactly. I was so after that, I was sort of wondering if the niece and nephew were doing it just to, was that a hint or something? But yeah, I have a million of these Catalan mushroom shirts now because every time I go there, they give me more of them, and they're all I like them. They're fun. So anyway, anything else before I actually? Um, I think oyster mushrooms are very, very versatile. They go in everything. That's what I think. If I had to say something that's I used to kind of turn my nose up at oysters, and in recent years I love them. I use them for everything. Uh, so uh okay, so one thing I'm going to jump into food now, and I promise I'll answer as many silly questions as anybody wants about my wardrobe or otherwise. Um but so every time I do these talks, I always love to show people ceviche because it's got a lot of talking points. So if you've seen me do the talks, you've seen me do the ceviche thing. I'm sure I did it when I was here before. Um, So I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, know what ceviche is. The idea is that it's popular all over Latin America, all over the Caribbean, where they'll marinate fish or seafood in lime juice or sometimes some other acidic liquid. And while it's marinating, it actually kind of cooks the fish. What's actually happening is the acid in the lime juice denatures the proteins in the fish the same way that heat does. So it changes the physical structure the same way the heat does. So here's the first science part of this lecture today. Mushrooms are not fish, and you can look it up. I have so mushrooms are not fish. So mushrooms don't get their structure from proteins. Mushrooms get their structure from chitin, which is some really complicated polysaccharide that is, I'm not a chemist, but it's what gives structure to crustacean shells, among other things. And lime juice is not going to break that down the way it would, change the texture of fish. And if you doubt that, I encourage you to get some crab shells and cover them with lime juice, and write me a letter. Snail mail is fine when you've noticed a change. So, so with mushrooms, marinating them in lime juice, you're not going to get that same change you get as you do with fish or seafood. So when I'm marinating mushrooms like this, I'm boiling them first. And so now this part is less of a joke than the fish thing. This is actually serious. Mushrooms are not vegetables. And we've been trained to think of mushrooms as these weird vegetables, and we treat them like vegetables. But like I said, mushrooms get their structure from chitin. Vegetables get their structure from cellulose, mostly, which is a water-soluble starch. So if you throw a mushroom or if you throw vegetables in boiling water, you come back in a while, you get cloudy water with some fibers floating in it. With mushrooms, you throw them in boiling water. Once they're cooked through, which basically means the cell walls burst, once they're cooked through, there's no texture change. You could leave them in there for an hour. They're going to be the same as after you put them in there 3 minutes. So the reason I bring this up is people ask me, how long do I boil the mushrooms when I do ceviche? And my answer is, I don't know, till they're done. I usually put them in, cut them in manageable size pieces for like 5 minutes, maybe 7 minutes. If I'm not sure they're cooked all the way through, I give them a few more minutes. I don't worry about it because I'm not going to do anything. It's not going to hurt the texture at all. They're not going to become more soggy or mushy or start to disintegrate. The structure will hold up fine. Eventually, yeah, if you leave them boiling forever, they're going to give off a whole lot of flavor to the water. But if you do that, you can use the water as a base for a soup stock or something like that. So it's not a big deal. So anyway, in this bowl here, I have actually some oyster mushrooms and these are cultivated ones. Oyster mushrooms that I boiled for a few minutes to get them cooked through. Drained them out, cooled them down, and then I just covered them with lime juice. I chopped up a chili pepper. I used a serrano here, and I've just been marinating them with that and a little bit of salt. And I want to taste it because I have no idea where the seasoning's at. Needs a little bit of salt. I'm going to emphasize this again and again, if I remember to anyway. Taste your food when you cook. If you don't taste your food when you're cooking, if it's good, you got lucky. And that's not a joke. Um, so when I do ceviche, I always do the kind of Peruvian method of making ceviche. And actually, I realized I wanted to start cooking something here. I promise I'll explain what's going on here in a minute. I'm just putting a little bit of oil in the pan. I'm going to start cooking an onion down. So anyway, the idea of a Peruvian ceviche, again, there's a million different versions of ceviche. Peruvian, I think, is the best version. It's also one of the simplest. I also one of my early mentors in the kitchen when I first started cooking professionally was an old Peruvian guy. And so when he taught me ceviche, this is kind of adapted from his recipe with the fish, except instead of the fish, I'm boiling the mushrooms instead of starting with raw fish. But anyway, really simple. I just have the boiled mushrooms marinating in lime juice, the chili. Make this real spicy because some people can't handle a lot of heat. My Peruvian guy who showed me this once upon a time, when he used to when he made ceviche, if he couldn't find the traditional Peruvian chilies he'd like to use, he would use habaneros. So he liked it a little spicier than I could serve it to you guys. Uh, but let's see if I can do this without burning these onions. Um, but so anyway, to finish the ceviche is really easy. This has been marinating, I don't know, probably 25 minutes. It doesn't really matter how long you marinate it for up to this point. You want to do it at least 15 minutes so you have time for the flavors to get into the mushrooms a little bit. But even if you leave it for a couple hours, it's going to be fine. The important part is the finishing part that I'm doing now. You want to do at the very end. So what I have here, these are just some thin sliced red onion. I had them just in ice water. And the ice water, this is another trick that same guy showed me. The ice water does two things. It makes the onions a little more crispy. It gets them nice and crisp, so you get that textural thing in the ceviche. And the other thing it does is it also takes a little bit of the raw edge off them, so they're a little less harsh. Um, so I usually, when I do anything with raw onions these days, I kind of do this kind of soak in ice water, and you can do it even for 10, 15 minutes, or again, I often will just throw them in the fridge for a day or two, even and they're fine. So the other thing, so I just have the onions. I'm going to add a little bit of cilantro, and that's really all I'm going to do to this to finish it. Again, I want to taste it again and just make sure I'm good with the seasoning. And then I'm going to pass this off to my lovely helpers in a moment. Yeah, I still think it needs a little salt. But so I'm going to, where's Beth and yeah, and Sherry, yeah, whoever wants to be my victim. So the other thing you'll see with this as it comes around with Peruvians, so this is going to go in here, and some of the liquid in there is good. I mean, it makes soup, but you know what I'm saying. If some of the liquid goes in with it, it's good. Yeah. All right. Yeah, I brought my sarcasm with me today, and by that I mean Sherry. Yeah. Oh, in the pan here, I just use canola oil. So when I'm doing these things for people, usually what I want to do is make it as much about the flavor of the basic ingredients I'm showing you as possible. So I like to use what I call kind of neutral oils, I call them. And that, I mean, canola oil, avocado seed oil, grape seed oil, those kind of oils that just don't have a lot of flavor. You can use whatever you want for whatever fats you want, whether bacon fat or olive oil. I live with a Spaniard, so we have always multiple different extra virgin olive oils in my house. But yes. So yeah, but in this case, I'm just cooking with canola oil. Um, I think that yeah, I'll talk about it when it matters. But yeah, feel free to ask that. Anything else before I jump to something total? Oh, that's what I was going to say. So the ceviche, you'll notice when it starts to come around that it's the Peruvians always serve it with boiled sweet potato, and the sweet potato cuts through the acid, and the sweet starchiness helps with the acid, and it also helps with the heat because they like it really spicy. So it does both. And Yeah, that's fine. As long as there's enough to go around, that's fine. Be generous. So we need enough for 48. And yeah, so everything I'm showing you today is in the book. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry? Yeah, so you'll see the garnish in the bottom. When the cup comes around, you'll see there's a little bit of what's it? Yeah, just a little bit of boiled sweet potato as garnish. It's a very, you'll always see that if you get ceviche from Peruvians. They have other things they'll put too, like they have something called choclo corn, which is really big starchy kernels of corn, which is delicious and wonderful, but it's pretty much impossible to find if you don't really know where to shop for it, and even then you'll only find it frozen. Um, but yeah, go ahead. I have never done it with porcini just because I'm always so excited to use porcini buttons for other things, but I bet it would work well, actually. I don't see why not. What's that? When I do this ceviche, I I always boil the mushrooms first. You can do like marinated porcini, just shaving raw buttons is wonderful, but it's not going to be the same as this. If you do I mean, you can marinate raw porcini buttons in lime juice without cooking them, but you won't get the textural change. I want the textural change. That's why I'm boiling them. Yeah. Yeah, I want to change and it's not just the texture though. It also the marinade penetrates better when you cook it through first because you're bursting the cell walls open. So there's the marinade has a place to go. Yeah, I would give a spoon with this one. All right, you had a question. No, so as far I don't want to get too off topic here, but yeah, as far as like tolerance to chilies and stuff, you will, yeah, it's a tolerance thing. The more you eat it, the more you get accustomed to it and the more you can handle. And that's on through your whole digestive tract, shall we say. Okay, so while this, all right, well, good, thank you. Yeah, I'm in terms of which dish to serve, or in terms, I'm not sure I understand the. Oh, so the ceviche is definitely more of a warm weather thing traditionally, but it's something I like to show because I think it's I think there's a lot of technique related stuff and just kind of basic biology, chemistry stuff that I like to talk about. So I like to always show it, but it's really more of I think of it as a warm weather thing for sure. And the ceviche, it's something I often do this ceviche as just a little tostada, kind of just, like a nice round crispy tortilla chip. And I might actually put the sweet potato as a layer on the bottom, then put the ceviche, and then you could garnish it with like a slice of avocado or something. I serve it like that a lot, actually. So as that goes, so at this, what's that? Yeah, there should be a spoon. So everybody got the ceviche? Everybody? Um, So I'm gonna explain this pan now here quickly, and then I'm gonna jump to something else. So one thing I bring with me because I think it's so fun to share is has has how many of you know what wheat la coche is? So a good number of you. So wheat la coche, I love going through this drawn out this explanation, but wheat la coche is American farmers have traditionally called it corn smut. It's a fungus that attacks corn. It grows inside the kernels and swells the kernels up and makes them all funny looking grayish black. American farmers traditionally have called it corn smut. And when they find it in their fields, they tear out the corn and try and get rid of it. In Mexico, when they find it, they celebrate because it's worth way more than the corn. Uh, it's a really traditional in all over Mexico. I was just in Oaxaca. Every single menu had it used in like 5 different ways. Um, but this is an aside, but I just love saying this, so I'm going to say it anyway. So it's called corn smut is the traditional name, so I started calling it corn porn because I'm that way. But the good part though is one of my friends who always has to one up me started saying corn on the cob. So I'm trying to get that accepted as the common name. So if you guys can help me with that, because nobody can say wheat la coche, right? Porn on the cob is much more fun to say. So anyway, I brought some with me. It's one of those things. It's one of my favorite ingredients, and I love to share it. So what I brought with me is actually frozen. So wheat la coche is something that if you know, I know up here there's not tons of, huge fields of corn everywhere, but if you know somebody who, or if you go visit people sometimes who live in a corn growing area, they have wheat la coche. And I know I was in the Midwest in the summer this year and we walked the fields and we found lots of wheat la coche. Lots, yeah. I mean, for every 10 minutes walking, we found an ear or something like that. Yeah. For taste, for flavor above all. So real quickly back to this pan. I got a lot of stuff to get through. And you guys are worse than me with the tangents. So um so in this pan, I was just sauteing an onion. I just threw in some roasted poblano peppers, so mild green chilies, just roasted them, peeled the skin off. I threw them in. The wheat la coche I have, actually, you know what? Maybe I should pass a little bit of this around so you can see. Here's an example of a couple of these. And please don't try and eat these kernels. I don't think they're likely to make you sick if you eat them raw. Um, but you can pass this around. Um, so all I'm gonna do, I'm just adding the wheat la coche to the pan with the green chilies and the onion. I'm gonna add a little water because I'm not paying that much attention and I'm worried about burning the stuff in the pan. So this will make it so I'm making sure they're getting cooked through and also so I don't have to babysit the pan as much. So again, all that's in here now is just the onion I sauteed. I threw it in the roasted green chilies and the porn on the cob. Thank you. Yes, that is going to be the new common name. I will make it. So, with your help. But anyway, there was a question about fresh versus whatever. If you know somebody who grows corn in large quantities, especially corn for like animal feed, they have it. And it's just a matter of it freezes really well. All you do is strip it off the cob. And I strip it off the cob and throw it in containers like this and I freeze it. Frozen to me is pretty close to fresh. Um, they sell it canned. You can find in Latin markets. I find the canned stuff to really just taste like can. I, I don't find it to be very good, but yeah, I've never tried it freeze dried. That's an interesting. I've never heard of anybody freeze drying it, but that's kind of a fun idea. I know a couple people with freeze dryers. Now I know another one now. Um, so anyway, I'm gonna let this cook. We'll come back to it. Like I said, I have a lot of stuff to get through, so I don't want to get too bogged down. We'll talk more about this. I just want it to cook for a while. I might add a little bit more water to it just to make sure that it cooks without me burning it because I forget about it. I'll give you something else to taste since you're so polite listening to me babble like this. Um, so one of these things I've really gotten into lately uh, is again a lot of the people in this room like myself are mushroom hunters, right? So if you're a mushroom hunter, when the season's good, you have a lot of mushrooms and you're eating mushrooms every day. And after a while, I don't need the mushrooms to always be the center of every plate. I don't need them to be the star, but I still want to use them. So I've gotten really into the idea of using mushrooms more for just bulk sometimes, just use them as, you know, the bulk in a dish instead of instead of being the, you know, the focus. And so that means sometimes, for example, like Russula brevipies, which is the mushroom that turns into a lobster. I'll boil that mushroom and then I'll just use that instead of chickpeas to make hummus. And it's really good. And I've served it to a lot of people and they don't know the difference. Actually, I do it a lot with white button mushrooms too. Works great. But I started playing with mushrooms for stuff like that. And I in the last few years, I came across there's another traditional Middle Eastern dip called muhammar, which I'm guessing most people here don't know. It's something I said I just discovered in the last few. Wow. I think she just threw the gauntlet down. um, I have been called dumb, so I'm not going to argue. Yes. So says that Sherry is my sidekick. So she just moved here from Washington, and I told her she should meet the mushroom people here. So that's Sherry. Anyway, Muhammara, it's I think it's originally from Syria, but it's a dip that it's made with roasted walnuts and roasted red peppers, and traditionally pita bread forms a lot of the bulk of it. And the seasoning is, and yeah, you can pass that out now, actually. So I made this one where instead of using the pita bread for the bulk, I just roasted mushrooms. And I actually roasted cremini mushrooms because I went to the store and they had creminis. But I've done it with hedgehogs, I've done it with chanterelles, I've done it with oysters, I've done it with a lot of different mushrooms. And you're not really going to taste the mushrooms. The mushroom is the bulk of what you're eating, though. And so, like I said, I've just been really into this idea lately of using mushrooms like this, where you get at this nutritional thing. The flavoring in here, again, it's the roasted mushrooms with roasted walnuts and roasted red peppers. The seasoning traditionally is sumac, which is a spice that's kind of a sour flavored spice, and pomegranate molasses, which is kind of really sweet kind of thing, and usually like a little bit of like red chili flakes, you know, but it's not a spicy thing. Anyway, I find this stuff so addictive. I make big batches to this stuff and I just scoop it up and make meals out of it. It's actually a really healthy thing that I find really satisfying. It'll be very easy to make substitutions for most of these. So, you guys tasting the Muhammad, do you like it? Because it's something, like I said, I'm addicted to this stuff. I've been making it a lot lately just for myself to eat. I'm just adding a little more water to this. Like I said, I don't want to burn this stuff in the pan because I'm very capable. Any questions about anything else before I change topics again on you guys?
Yeah, I got a question.
Yeah, go ahead. And the question is basically, what's happening when you're cooking mushrooms that makes them more digestible, safer to eat? And there's several different things at play there. So sometimes sometimes it's just about things being, you know, densely fibrous and, you know, that need to be broken down a little so you can handle eating them. I'm going to give you the wheat la coche here in a moment. And so sometimes it's just about that, just cooking to help break it down a little bit. Sometimes there's actually volatile chemicals in them. Um, like morels actually have some weird hydrazine chemicals in them that if you don't cook them away, make most people pretty damn sick. Um, so sometimes it's that. Uh, sometimes it's not just volatile chemicals. Sometimes there's just chemicals that are not heat stable that need to be broken down that some, if not most people have reactions to. Like even shiitakes are one of those. Shiitake mushrooms make some significant percentage of people sick or not sick, but they actually get a really nasty rash. Like it's a really horrible rash that some significant percentage of people get if they eat them raw. But it's just I don't know what chemical it is, but there's some chemical in it that's just not heat stable. You cook it and it's fine. So it could be any of those kinds of things with mud, and there's probably some other thing also that's happening when you're cooking mushrooms. And we can talk a little bit about what it means to actually cook things thoroughly. So any question? I'm going to change the subject again. So here's your chance to ask me a question before I do. Yeah. So so there's a few of them. Shrimp rucola are wonderful. I think I used shrimp rucola when I was here last time when I did the ceviche. Um, Shrimp rucola, one of the most underrated great mushrooms. Learn that mushroom. Really good. Lobster mushrooms work great. Um, do you guys have cokora here? So cokora are probably my absolute favorite to use for the ceviche. Obviously, make sure you know your mushrooms. Don't go eating amanitas if you don't know what you're doing. But the cokora are wonderful. Um, the cokora is the Amanita calyptroderma, if you don't know that one. But yeah, so that ceviche works with a lot of different mushrooms. But all of those mushrooms have kind of fishy flavors. Um, all right, so while she's getting that together, so any other questions? Because again, I'm about to change subjects here again on you guys. Um, so one of my big pet peeves is every mushroom hunter I know likes to make cream of mushroom soup, and everybody I know, or most people I know, do this kind of, again, back to the Betty Crocker thing, where the using the roux as the base to thicken the soup and all that. And most of the people I know, I know really no chefs anymore who make creamy soups using roux. There's a time and a place for a roux. It's a good technique. If you don't know what a roux is, that's kind of the flour and fat to start that you kind of cook a little bit and then add in your liquid and it thickens it up. But most people I know these days, professionals, are not thickening soups that way. Most professionals these days are thickening soups more using the ingredient they're actually making the creamy thing out of is the thickener. So I have a cream of chanterelle soup here. It is a very boring demo, but it's a very interesting bite of food. Um, so do you guys how many people here know what a dry saute is? So a lot of you know dry saute. So let me explain dry saute, and I'm going to actually tie this back to the cooking mushrooms thoroughly thing. So a dry saute, the idea is wild mushrooms are full of water. You throw them in a pan, all the water comes out. The idea of a dry saute, you want to get the water out before you start doing anything else. So start with a really hot pan. Um, when the pan is screaming hot, throw your mushrooms in dry. No oil, no anything, just throw the mushrooms in, let the water come out. And when the water comes out, let it boil down, cook away. When it reduces away almost completely, turn your heat down, add the fat to the pan, and then start sauteing from there. And that's the idea of a dry saute. I'm going to go on a tangent here because I want to tie it back to the idea of thoroughly cooking mushrooms. There's two things you can do if you're worried about thoroughly cooking mushrooms to make them safe. And one of them is you can just boil them first and then saute them because boiling things will cook them through. But the other thing is you can do what I call a wet saute. And a wet saute is basically the same idea as a dry saute. Start with a hot pan, throw your stuff in there dry, and instead of waiting for the water to come out, just pour some water into the pan. So like enough to cover the mushrooms, and then you know you're boiling them down in there. And so again, when the liquid's gone, you turn your heat down a little bit, add your fat. But that extra little bit of cooking time with that extra time simmering in the water is is going to make sure that you're thoroughly cooked. Like this idea of how long you cook something to make sure it's thoroughly cooked, there's no good answer to that. Yeah. I don't know if it makes them brown faster, but I think it helps the texture in a lot of mushrooms for sure. Um, I actually, that technique that I just said, the wet saute, like that is, I think that's how I cook most of my cultivated mushrooms. Most of the mushrooms I'm buying at the store is the exact opposite problem of wild mushrooms, where instead of being too wet, they're too dry. So you throw them in a pan and they just burn on the outside, but they're still raw in the middle. So this way you actually plump them up, get them moist, and then you can brown them still. Um, so I use that technique a lot. So anyway, back to the soup. This was about soup, remember? Somebody's got to keep me in line here. Cream of mushroom soup. So this soup, I just explained what a dry saute is. To make this, I dry sauteed chanterelles. I did it in batches because I didn't want to crowd the pan too much. I didn't want them piled up on top of each other. But I just dry sauteed them. In the case of this, I just use canola oil like I have here, just a neutral flavor oil because I want to taste the chanterelles. With chanterelles, I don't brown them a lot. I think you kind of lose a lot of what makes them nice if you brown them too much. And sorry, the wheat la coche that's going around, the poblanos are a little spicier than I expected them to be, so I apologize if they're a little hot for some people. The But anyway, I dry sauteed the chanterelles until they first started to brown. Didn't brown them a lot, just they first started to show some browning. I hit them with a good splash of white wine just to scrape the goodies off the pan. Yeah, add just a little bit of acidity in the background. And then when the wine was reduced, I just filled the pan with water. That's it. And how much water? It doesn't matter. And the reason is I bring it up to a boil, I let it lower it so it simmers, and I just let it simmer for a while. When it starts tasting really good, it'll start tasting like chanterelles. At that point, I throw it in a blender and puree it. And if it's too thin, I just throw it back in the pan, let it reduce down a little more. That's why I don't care how much water is in there. And if it's too thick when I start blending it, I can just add water to the blender. So it doesn't matter how much. And so to make the soup, when I'm blending it, and the only thing I season this with is salt. So when I'm blending it, I just, as it gets smooth and creamy textured, I just slowly pour in some cream while it's blending. And you can do this. I used cream. I've been on like a dairy kick lately. I'm sorry if anybody here has dairy issues, but I spent time in the Midwest this summer and it's kind of contagious, I think. Uh, okay, good. I live in a place where I have to, everybody's got a special need. So anyway, you don't have to use cream. You can use just even extra virgin olive oil. You can use coconut cream. You can use whatever non-dairy fat you like. Heavy cream just tastes really good. And the other thing that makes heavy cream kind of magical, the reason a lot of chefs like heavy cream is because it emulsifies things. Which means it keeps the fat and the water from separating from each other. So that's why a lot of people like to use heavy cream. And so this I'm ready to give you if you're ready for it. Let me just taste and make sure it's seasoned good. I wouldn't change a thing. You still have, let me give you a towel. Put that on so you don't burn up. I have plenty. But so this soup is very, very, very simple chanterelles. Again, it's just chanterelles, a little bit of white wine just to clean the pan, and water, and then a little cream to blend it. Um, I like to show, I could probably turn that flame off. I like to show this, I like to talk about this and let you guys taste it because I think it's a little different approach to doing things than most people are used to. You can do this, you can make it as complicated as you want. You can add onions, you can add garlic, you can add whatever herbs, you can add whatever vegetables you want. But you can season it however you want. I like to keep it really, really simple here just so you guys get the idea of what it is. again, if you want to make it thicker, just let the water reduce down a little more. You want to make it thinner, add a little more water. It's that easy. Yeah. I have not used a lot of powdered mushrooms. I use them sometimes. I'll mix them into things sometimes, but I usually season food fairly simply. And when I want mushrooms, I will. I will just kind of add either chunks of fresh mushrooms, chunks of dried mushrooms. If there's nothing wrong with using the powders. It's just not something I do a lot unless it's something where I need them to kind of disappear. I don't know how well they actually thicken. I'm not saying they don't. I'm just saying I don't know. So yeah, I don't know how to answer that better. You shouldn't need the spoon for that. It's a point. And this soup also, the creamy soup, it's something that normally I would, if I were serving this for a fancy dinner, I would probably save a bunch of chanterelles and just saute up and leave the chunks of the stuff in there, and I'd have whatever garnish. But again, I want you to just taste the soup as simply as it is. I have never heard of doing that with a jelly fungus, but I'm curious, meaning they just blend them up in there. That's a fun idea. I've never heard of that, but I like. This is a funny tangent for you. I like that idea. I have to play with this. I never thought of doing that. But so I you got me going on the Catalan thing before. So where in Catalonia, they eat a lot more mushrooms than we do here. There's a lot more market mushrooms than there are here. And there's 3 or 4 different hygrophorous waxy caps that are market mushrooms. And their common name is Yanega, which means the slimy one. So they like the slimy ones. Um, so if you go looking through Catalan cookbooks, you'll find recipes for these slimy mushrooms. And I'll never forget, I was reading some recipe a few years ago, and the recipe actually said, um, don't clean the slime off because it's really good to thicken the sauce. Oh, the Catalan stuff, yeah. So okay, yeah. So I wasn't going to go there today, but yeah. So I am real quickly. I have one of my big passion subjects lately has been kind of regional Spanish food, and that is the next book or possibly books that I'm working on, but that's a few years away. I have some work done on that. I have a website that I was doing during COVID lockdown that I need to get back to that has a bunch of recipes related to that. Here, that's fine. Get these out there so people can taste. Anything else while you're waiting for the chanterelle stuff to come out? Do you guys did you guys like the wheat la coche, by the way? How many of you that was the first time you had it? So a lot of you. Good. That was my hope. So the wheat la coche, I want to go back to that for a minute. So the soup is coming around now. The wheat la coche, it's something you can find frozen. I make no money from this, but I will say there's a company I deal with in the Bay Area all the time that's a family-run company that treats their employees really nicely and they're supportive of the community, so I'm happy to share their name with everybody. But there's a company called Far West Fungi. They always have it frozen, and I know they ship. So if anybody really wants it, that's a question that somebody always asks me after the fact. Oh yeah, exactly. They have a shop in the Ferry Building there. Yeah, nice. Yeah, they're really nice people. So I'm happy to throw business their way. They're really good people, and they're really supportive of the mushroom community. And anyway, the wheat la coche. It's the way I served it here. You'll see it sautéed really simply with chili and or with various chilies and or different herbs. So I see you guys like the soup. And again, it tastes like chanterelles, right? Because that's all it is. Yeah, there's no butter though. There's some cream. But it's not a crazy amount of cream either. It's uh, there's no butter. I actually just used the canola oil to cook those chanterelles. Nice. Thank you. So I just want to finish this thought quickly. I don't want to keep you guys here all night, and I got a couple more things to talk about. So the wheat la coche, you'll see it. One of the easiest things you can do with it is just saute it up with some chilies and throw it inside a quesadilla. That's a really traditional thing. It's one of the most common things you'll see in Mexico. You'll see it as part of a taco filling. You'll see it in like a million other little things that I can't even remember the names of. Really easy to use. It goes with all the summer ingredients. It goes great with like, squash and beans and all that. So it goes really well with a lot of different things. So I wanted to say about this soup also, and that you can also, the way I cooked it here, you can puree that. You could use that just as a garnish for things. You can puree it up, use it as a dip. It goes really good with seafood and things like that, like scallops or fish. Um, the soup. So the soup, this technique, I did this with chanterelles because chanterelles, I had a bunch of chanterelles and they're kind of the most common thing I see people doing cream of mushroom soup with. This kind of soup, any mushrooms that you like in kind of a creamy, saute with creamy stuff, they're going to be really good with this technique and this way. If you want to do it with dried mushrooms, dried mushrooms tend to be really intense, and if you go straight dried mushrooms, it'll wind up probably a little too bitter, a little too strong. So what I would recommend is start by just caramelizing some onion first, and then adding the dried mushrooms to that, and use the soaking liquid from the mushrooms as your water base. So you can make really good, simple stuff like this the same way. Um, there's actually a recipe in the book for a chestnut porcini one that is for me is a very Christmas thing. Um, I had the chanterelles. I almost cooked that one for you guys instead, but the chestnut porcini is exactly what I just described, where I just start by caramelizing some onions and then add some roasted chestnuts when I add the mushrooms in. But other than that, it's basically the same technique as this. Just cook it down with water. When you puree it, emulsify in some cream. But this works really well for vegetables too. I do this a lot where I'll just roast off something like cauliflower, make it really yummy, and then just toss it in a pan with a little bit of water just to make sure it's nice and soft. And then just again, puree it up the same way. If you want to use it as a sauce, just make it thicker. Again, just reduce it down more before you blend it. That's it. Um, so anyway, any questions before I move on to one last thing? Yeah. Yeah, why not? Yeah, you could definitely do this with mushrooms, with your turkey drippings to cook the mushrooms, for sure. You just want to make it a lot thicker than I made this. But yeah, absolutely. So I always like to end on a sweet bite. And so one of the things I've been doing for a long time is candying mushrooms. And one of my favorite mushrooms to candy is chanterelles. Because they have that natural kind of fruity component to them. And when I talk about candying mushrooms, what I mean is just like you would candy anything, just kind of with mushrooms by weight, I usually go 3 parts mushroom, 2 parts sugar by weight. And then don't go yet. Don't go yet. Let me introduce it. You guys. Yeah, exactly. I haven't even said what that is yet. So I want them to pay attention a little longer. So, so anyway, candy mushrooms, what I usually do, 3-part mushroom, 2 parts sugar by weight, just cover them with water, just simmer it down gently. When it starts to get syrupy thick, the syrup is in the mushroom and the mushroom flavor is in the syrup. If you're doing something like chanterelles that have a lot of flavor, I usually just use granulated sugar. I don't flavor the syrup because I want the flavor of the mushrooms. If you're doing something like cat's tongue, for example, that doesn't have a lot of flavor, and actually some of the waxy caps you can do this with, it's really cool, that don't have a lot of flavor. You can flavor the syrup with anything. You can do it with, citrus peels or vanilla or cardamom or cinnamon, whatever. You can even do it in like grape juice or apple juice, or even liqueurs. Uh, uh, but just reduce them down. Uh, One of my favorite mushrooms, I'm so happy to see this on the table. Everybody knows what agaricus is. I was really excited. I didn't say this was why I was excited when I saw it before, but this was why I was excited. Everybody knows agaricus. Agaricus are button mushroom, portobello cremini, which are all the same species, Agaricus bisporus. Um, there are hundreds of agaricus species that grow wild in North America. I don't know how many you have here, but I'm sure it's double digits. Uh, there are a whole bunch of mushrooms in agar, a whole bunch of species, a whole section of the genus that have a natural sweet almond extract aroma to them. This one here happens to be one of them. We could argue about what the actual species name is of this, but it's very obviously one of those. Um, this is a horse mushroom. We all learned it as arvensis years ago. I don't think that's the right name anymore. I think it's something else now, but I don't know. Near me, they call it Fisheratus now. Here, it might still be arvensis. I don't know. But anyway, those Amandia agaricus are, and I know they grow here because I have proof. Um, they are some of my very favorite things for using in sweet things for candying. You can dry them, and that's something where I'll actually grind them and powder them and mix them into like cookies and stuff like that. Those, I love them candied. I love using them candied. Yeah. So this is an important note. So dehydrating mushrooms does not cook them. If you're talking about a mushroom that needs to be thoroughly cooked, dehydrating is not that. Dehydrated morels, if you eat them, they will make you sick. Um, very sick. But so agaricus, I'm not saying you should eat pounds of raw agaricus like an apple, but eating a little bit of agaricus raw isn't going to hurt you. So I don't worry about it with those. I dehydrate them and I'll just use them in something. And they usually wind up getting baked afterwards anyway, so I don't really care. So the last thing I have, this is a very roundabout way to get to what they were so eager to give you. Um, there is a traditional almond cake from the west coast of Spain, Galicia, where my wife's mother is from. And it's called the Tarta de Santiago. It is one of the easiest cakes you'll ever make if you're a baker. If you've ever made a cake batter, start by separating your eggs. You have your yolks, you kind of what they call cream it with the sugar. You basically just beat the sugar into it till it starts getting white. So start like that. In this case, I use less sugar, and then when they start fluffing up, when the yolks start fluffing up like that, I add the candied mushrooms, mix that in, and then just add the almond flour. And then the whites that were separated, beat those to kind of stiff peaks and fold it into that other mix. That's the whole thing. It's that easy a cake. So now you can pass it out. Thank you. So this is something. It's funny that if you've ever baked, so if you know the flavor of the Amandia agaricus, you will taste it in this cake. If you don't know it, you might not understand what you're tasting. But this cake, it's funny with the if you've ever baked where you see recipes where you add applesauce to a recipe and it makes the thing more moist. The candied mushrooms do the same thing when you blend them up and put them into a batter. That was kind of a funny discovery when I realized that once upon a time. I actually hope they save me a piece of cake because I really want.
Almond flour.
So this is just almond flour, eggs, sugar, and the almond agaricus. That's all that's in this cake. I love this cake. I've been making this cake now for at least or about 10 years or so. And I've served it to people from that part of Spain who are used to the really traditional one without the mushrooms, and they actually agree it makes the cake better. So, at least to my face, they say that. In all seriousness, I've had the reputation at times of cooking the weird stuff and eating the weird stuff, but when I'm serving food to people, I get paid to serve food to people. So if they're not happy, they don't come back. I don't want to serve you food that I don't think is good. So, and I try to gauge how good something is by serving it to non-mushroom people who aren't excited about the novelty of eating the thing with the mushrooms. So anyway, do you guys like the cake?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the reaction I want. So I have been talking at you for about an hour and 10 minutes. I could talk at you for another hour and 10 minutes, but I want to wrap up here. I'm happy to answer any other questions. I really do appreciate you guys having me up here again. Thank you, Chris. And yeah, if anybody's interested in a book, I have books with me here. Yeah. Anyway, thank you for having me, and appreciate it.